Okay, so last week what we looked at was how to checkmate with a rook and a king versus a lone king, right? So we learned about the cutoff rule. We learned about how to use our king and knight move away from the opponent's king and stuff like that, right? So if you guys need a refresher about that, then I posted the videos on YouTube, right? And I shared my YouTube channel link with you. And if you need it again, I'll probably send it at the end of this class as well. So yeah, it should be there, and it's titled like Beginner 5, how to checkmate with the Rook and King. So it's pretty obvious which one you should watch. So there's that, and also our next piece of information is on May 18th, which is 3 weeks from now. 3 weeks on a Thursday. So after school from 2:30. Well, when does your guys' school end on Thursday? Ends up like Aryan?
On Thursday, our school ends at our grade ends at 1:15, but I'm not sure for other classes.
I think it is this. I'm pretty sure it's the same for every class, but either way, it's gonna be from 2:30 to 4:30, like approximately. It's not that exact time, but we're gonna like have it approximately in that time, and
Wait.
it's gonna be at Natoma Station, uh, in the multi-purpose room, right? Ian?
Час 31. Ты про турнир 18 мая?
Did I heard it written because I was talking with my dad.
Yeah, so do you have a question? You're just asking, like,
No, I'm just asking, did I miss something?
from last week, or?
No, did you said
Oh, yeah, no, I was
something?
just talking about, okay, so we are having a chess tournament on May 18th on Thursday. That's a
Oh,
Thursday, after school from 2:30 to 4:30, okay? And so in that time, you guys are going to be able to like, so we've learned a lot like over these last few classes and what we're going to learn right now. So you guys are going to be able to play against people your own skill level and test um, how much you've improved from the beginning. And so to participate in the tournament, I sent out an email. It's titled End of Year Tournament and Announcements. So um, yeah, so if you're one sec. To register for the tournament, there's a Google form attached there, and you can click on that, and you should be able to participate. All right. So you have to click down that. There's some feedback for the class, and there's also the actual registration, and then you'll be able to join the tournament. And also, uh, if you want to get a USCF membership, which is like if you want to like continue chess outside of these classes, it like allows you to participate in tournaments and stuff like that and get like an actual rating, then you can register for that, and you'll need to talk about that with your parents if you think that's best, if you want to continue with chess. And I think that's it for the announcements we have. So does anybody have any questions about the tournament or how to register or anything? Nicholas?
What is it called?
however, no.
What do you mean? Which is what called?
Like like the chess?
Oh, it's a tournament. Oh, are you talking about the like membership?
Tournament? No, I'm talking about the tournament.
Yeah. What about it?
So is a tournament like we just play chess together?
Yeah, you just play against. Most likely, you'll end up playing against people from this class. So Ian might play Arian, or Mateo might play you. So stuff like that. And so there will be like I have another class. And some people from that class might decide to enter in your section, and you might also play against them. So yeah, it gives you like people from your skill level that you can play against. All right. So um if nobody has any more questions, then we can get started for what we're gonna. Yeah, Anu.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, Kapilan.
Oh yeah.
Actually, on Thursday, his school will finish by 2:45 p.m. Actually.
Oh, 2:45.
Yeah.
Okay, so well, we probably won't get started at 2:30. So I'm guessing we'll probably like end up only starting at 3 or something like that. So it should be fine. I don't think we'll end up starting exactly on time because there's a
Okay.
lot of other
Yeah.
stuff to do.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's start with what we are doing today. So let me share my screen. Okay, so what we're going to be doing today is looking at the opening. Okay, so in chess, there are three phases or three parts to the game. Okay, so number one is the opening. So the opening is when you have all the pieces in their normal positions, right? And it's usually the first 10 to 15 moves of the game. 10 to 15 moves. And let's say on average a chess game ends in 40 moves. So let's say it's the first 10 to 15 moves. And in these 10 to 15 moves, we're going to learn what you need to do to get a good position. To get like to set yourself up for success basically. And in the middle game, which is the second phase, okay, so now we've looked at the opening, now the middle game. Now the middle game is where you use the good position you got in the opening and you use that to try and win some material. So you try and get an extra pawn, you try to get an extra knight or something like that. Okay? And if you're able to win some material like that, even a rook or a queen, if you know you get a really good position, then you can use that in the third phase of the game. And the third phase of the game is the end game. So in the end game, you use that extra material you got. So let's say you got an extra rook. Okay? Then you use that extra rook to try and win in the end game. Alright, so you like we already looked at how to win if you have one rook and one king versus a lone king. You use those like tactics and uh, calculation to win the game at that point. So those are the three phases of the game, and they are, consecutive. And you need to do good in one if you want to get a good position for the next phase. All right. So on average, the opening first 10 to 15 moves, then the middle game is the next 15 to 20 moves, and then the end game is usually the last 10 moves, 10ish, 20, 10 to 20, depending on how good of a position you got in the other parts of the game. In case you want a lot of material, then you can win quicker. Okay, so today we're going to be looking at the first stage of the game, the opening. All right. So now in the opening, you have all your pieces uh, like this, right? But you'll notice that only the knights can move because they can jump over, right? We already talked about that in like our first few sessions. The knights can jump over the pawns, right? They can jump over, so that's how they're able to move. So this knight can go here, here. This knight can go here, here. We have those kind of moves, but every other piece it can't move because it's being blocked by pawns, right? All these pieces are being blocked. And so, the first thing we're going to do in the opening is number one, move one of your central pawns, which is one of these two, right? So, right in front of your king or queen, these are your central pawns because it's like they're in the middle of the board, right? So let's say there's these three, then these two files are in the middle, right? These two pawns, they're in the middle of every other pawn. So you move one of these two pawns into the center. And you might be asking, where's the center? So the center is an important concept of the opening, and the center is these four squares. They are in the direct center of the board. So it's on d5, d4, e4, and e5. These four squares are going to be called the center, and you need to control the center in the opening, or else you won't get a good position. So let's say we want to control one of these squares, right? Now, how do we control a square? So controlling a square, we either put one of our pieces or pawns on one of the squares. So let's say this pawn, this square, right? So this is one square in the center. So I can move my pawn to that square. Now I'm controlling this square, okay? And any square that I'm attacking. So you'll notice that right here, right? Now we moved, one sec. So we moved our pawn here. Now we're controlling this square, but this pawn attacks two squares, right? This square, d5 and f5. Now f5 isn't part of the center, so that doesn't really matter to us. Well, it is still important, but not as important as this square. Now this square, it is a part of the center. And since our pawn is attacking that square, we're also controlling this square. So center control is an important concept we need to know if we want to do well in the middle game and the rest of the opening. So let's say we played this move, e4. Now that is our first step. Move one of our pawns into the center. Now instead of d4, the other move is, or instead of e4, right, this was e4, the other move is d4. Now either of these moves, they're both good. Now there's some people that try like this and other moves, but those aren't as good, so I just suggest you guys stick to e4 or d4. One of these two moves. Alright? So, now why do we need to move a pawn into the center? Now you'll see that our bishop can move, and our queen, right? In the previous position, our bishop is being blocked, and it can't move anywhere. Now, after we played e4, this bishop has space. It can move somewhere, right? Now, I have a question for you guys. Let me flip the board. So, we talked about how e4 was a way to gain space in the center for white, right? Now, let's say you're black in this position, okay? What do you guys think is a good move for black if they want to gain space and take control in the center? I'll give you guys until 5:47, and we'll see what your guys. We're gonna go through every single person and see what their answer is. All right. So 2 minutes, and I'm gonna need to do something real quick, so I'll be back. All right, I'm back. So 1 more minute. What should black do in this position if he wants to take control in the center? Okay, let's start with Ian.
The the pawn on e7 is gonna move on e5.
Okay, so Ian says e5. Now, does anybody have a different answer? Let's go with Aryan.
Um. Maybe maybe black should move maybe black should move the pawn which is in the center.
Yeah, so which pawn?
The d file pawn.
Alright, and to which square?
To d to d to d6.
Okay, and how about Mateo? So we have Ian said e5 and Aryan said d6. Yeah, Mateo?
The E pawn to E4.
Well, this is e4. The pawn can't jump to e4. Did you mean e5?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Nicholas?
I think that the D7 pawn needs to go to go one jump.
So, one up?
Yeah.
Alright, and that is d6, okay? And finally, Anu? Anu? You're on mute. Okay, we'll come back to you later. Okay, so yeah, you guys made really good moves. So e5 is a good move, right? You're controlling this square, the e5 square, and you're controlling the d4 square, right? And d6 is also a good move. You're controlling the e5 square with your pawn. So, there's also a bunch of other options, right? Let's say I played e6. Now, which central square is this pawn controlling? Which square? You can just raise your hand. Nicholas?
The white is controlling D6. Oh no. Yeah, D6.
Alright, yeah, it's controlling d6, right? But
Oh, I mean D5.
okay, yeah, that's correct. It is controlling d5, right? This is one of the 4 central squares that this pawn is controlling. Nice. Okay, so d6 with c5, you're controlling this square, right? You could play d5. You're basically controlling this square and attacking this. So it's like an exchange, right? They're attacking each other. So yeah, these are all great moves for black, right? They're trying to take space in the center. Okay, now let's just focus on d5 for now. All right, so I mean e5. Okay, there we go. So now we moved a pawn into the center, right? And we're controlling some central squares. Then black moved a pawn into the center, and he's controlling some central squares. Now what do we do? So our next step After we already, okay, so our first step, we have move a pawn into the center, right? So we moved one of our pawns into the center. Now, our second step is going to be develop a knight. So one knight. So you need to develop one of these. So you might ask, what is develop? So developing is just simply the act of moving one of your pieces out into the open. So like moving one of your pieces basically. And how that looks like, just any knight move here is going to be developing this knight. So if you move it away from the starting square, like right now this knight is in the starting G1 square. If you move it away from there, then it's developed. Okay? So now I would like you guys to give me some examples of other places instead of knight f3. Another place that one of these knights could go to. There's a lot of options here. So if you know the answer, you can just raise your hand. Orion?
I accidentally raised my hand.
Okay. So what is one square that either of these knights could go to? Nicholas?
Um, the knight, um, the right knight can go to f3.
Yeah, so we saw knight f3. And there's a bunch of options here, alright? So this G1 knight, it can go to E2, right? It can go to H3, and we saw it can go to F3. This knight can go to knight C3, right? C3, or it can go to A3. Now, why is knight E2 not a good move? It's because it's blocking our bishop, right? Now, we saw that the whole point of moving our pawn, was so the bishop could move, right? The bishop and the queen. Now, if we play knight d2, we're blocking our bishop, so it's counterintuitive. So it's not a good move. So knight f3, it's probably the best move. It's gonna not take up so much space. Okay. Alright, so now we move a knight into the center. And why is this a good move? Because we're also trying to take more control, right? Now, this pawn was controlling this square and this square. Now our knight is attacking this pawn and controlling this square. So, it's like an exchange. Now black is going to do the same thing. Alright? He's going to develop one of his knights to control the center. Well, his pawn's under attack, right? So he needs to develop his knight and defend this pawn at the same time, or he could just develop a knight. So the best move is probably knight to c6. Now the knight is defending the pawn and it's controlling this square. Alright? So now we have the second step of the plan. So first we move out one of our pawns into the center to take space and control, right? And then we move out one of our knights. So we moved out this knight. Next, we move out one of our bishops. So we saw that the reason we moved one of our pawns into the center was so we could move the bishop, right? So now let's move the bishop. Now developing the bishop, right? So we have a few choices. Why is this not a good move though? What can black play here? Why is bishop a6 not a good move? What will black play? Aryan?
Um, like one of Black's pawns, they could capture the bishop diagonally.
Exactly.
Like
The b7 pawn will capture on a6, so it's b takes a6. And now we just lost a bishop on the third move, so that's not good. So bishop a6 isn't the best move, but not there. Bishop a6 isn't the best move, but any other move works really. Let's just go over here. We're attacking the opponent's knight. Well, actually, let's go here. It's a simpler move. Okay. Okay, so bishop to c4. Now, black will do the same thing, right? Now he's going to develop his bishop. He can't develop this bishop because it's still blocked, right? But the other bishop, he can still move. So let's say he moves the other bishop over here, all right? Now, there's still a lot of like controlling going on, right? So it's pretty chaotic right now. And now we reach our fourth step. So first, move a pawn into the center. Second, move a knight out. Develop a knight. Third, develop one bishop. Now, here we have a bit of room. We can do two things here, and it's depending on what you want to do. So first, number one, you could castle. So, castling, does anybody remember how to castle? Aryan?
It's where like you move the king near the rook, and then the rook gets in front of the king, so the king is protected.
Exactly. So, the king, it moves, the exact way to do it is you move the king 2 squares to the right, okay? And then the rook will jump over the king. Alright, and now the reason we castle is because we have this kind of shield, right? Now the king is super protected. Alright, so you could castle, or you could develop your other knight. So, like this. Alright, now you'll notice, let's say we castle, okay? Now the reason that there's a bit of room is, depending on if you're white or black, you might not have the ability to castle immediately. So you saw here, we have the option to castle, right? But now, in this position, black can't castle because the knight is blocking. Remember, you cannot castle if a piece is in between the king and the rook. Okay? So that means that black can't castle. But what he can do is the other option, which is to move out his other knight. Alright? So now, while we castled, our opponent, he moved out his knight. Now it's completely fine. It's basically like an interchange. Now, if he moves out his knight, now if we castle, then we have to do the other option. And if we do the other option, then we have to castle. So if we castle, then we have to move out our knight the next move. And if we move out our knight first, then we have to castle the next move. Alright, so does that make sense?
Yes.
Alright, so now we've added 4 steps, technically 5 actually, to our plan. So number one, we move a pawn into the center. Alright? We gain space, take control. Number 2, we develop a knight to continue taking space. Number 3, we develop a bishop. Number 4, we can castle or we can move out our second knight. So in this case, let's say we castled. Alright? Then, number 5, if we castled, we have to move out our knight. And if we moved out our knight first, then we have to castle right after that. Alright? So, like we saw here, in case we decided to, after developing our bishop, right? Instead of castling, let's say we moved out our other knight. Then, now, next move, we have to castle. Alright? So now we have these 5 steps, right? Now, with these 5 steps, we have a pretty complicated position, but you can notice that it's all like pretty coordinated, right? So all these pieces are trying to attack in the center, right? Control space and take space in the center, these 4 squares, right? And we also have our king is super safe. So black, okay, one sec, just really quickly. So since black moved out his knight first, he's gonna castle the next move. Alright? Now our king, both the kings are super safe under this like blockade. of like pieces, right? And now we enter an important phase of the opening. This is where we're like ending the opening. This is like the last few moves of the opening. And in these last few moves, what we have to do is achieve something called a pawn break. Now, a pawn break is, we saw that we moved one pawn into the center, right? With e4, right? And now the whole point of a pawn break is we have to move a second pawn into the center. A second pawn, alright? So something like d4 or f4 to attack in the center. Now, the reason you want two pawns in the center is, let's say we go back to the beginning, okay? Now, let's say here we moved one pawn in the center. Let's say black played a really bad move like h6, okay? Never do this in your game. It's a very bad move. But I'm just showing this for like example purposes. Now, if your opponent doesn't move another pawn into the center, you should immediately put the second pawn in the center. Now, if you get this, you'll notice why this is so good. So, this pawn controls this square and this square. This pawn controls this square and this square. So you'll notice these two pawns by themselves can control all four squares in the center. And now with this, let's say you could achieve like a dream position. So like this would be the best possible position you could get. Something like this. Everything's developed and you have your king castled super safe, your bishops are nice and strong, your knights are strong, you have two pawns in the center, and you can develop these other pieces later. Alright? So, with this, obviously this is never going to happen, right? Because it's not like your opponent's just going to keep on moving their rook up and down like that. But in case you could ever get that kind of position, it would be like a dream position, right? So, that's something we could try and achieve. And we could do that with a central pawn break. So moving our other pawn in the center. So, also, in case we move this pawn first, then the next pawn we're going to move out is going to be e4, right? That's our pawn break. Now, how do we achieve this? So, to get a pawn break, we now have to try and develop our other bishop. You'll notice this bishop's been pretty stuck behind these pawns, right? So we need to try and develop this bishop. But you'll notice that it can't move, right? Because it's like just being blocked by these pawns. So what you need to do is get one of those pawns out of the way. And the way to do that is just move them up. So you could play this, and this bishop could go over here, right? Or we could play this, and this bishop could move out here. So let's say we played d3. Alright? So now we have another step to our plan. So now we have 6, right? Now this might seem really complicated, like 6 steps, but in game, they're just like super simple. You just move out your pawn, move out your knight, move out your bishop, castle, move out your other knight, move out another pawn, and then move out your other bishop. Alright, so I mean it's pretty simple when you think about it. So now we move this pawn up, and we are going to try and move this bishop out, right? Somewhere out here. So let's say our opponent does the same thing. Now, we are going to develop this bishop. So, the whole point of this move was so we can move our bishop. So next move, we're going to move our bishop. So, we can put it in a multitude of squares, right? So we have d2, e3, or g5. Now the problem with f4 and h6, they're both being defended by the black pawns, right? So if we move there, then we'll just get captured, and we don't want that to happen. So let's say we go to g5. Now we have something that we learned about before. What is this when one piece in front can't move because the piece behind it is attacked? Do you remember? This was one of the tactical things I think we looked at one class. Alright, so this was called the pin, remember? So the pin is when one piece in front can't move, because if it does, the piece behind it is going to get captured. Alright, so now we developed our bishop. Aryan?
But isn't the rook defending the queen?
Okay, that's a good question. So, yeah, the rook is defending the queen, right? But remember at the library, I told you, so this queen, it's a lot more valuable than a bishop, right? So even though you lost your bishop, you gained a queen. And a queen is a lot more valuable than a bishop. So right now, even though your opponent has an extra bishop, we have an extra queen. And so and remember, the queen is a fusion of the bishop and the rook, right? So it's like we still have our bishop technically. So with that, a queen is just gonna completely destroy a bishop. So yeah. Nicholas?
Do you have to take care of your queen?
Yeah. So that is more in the middle game, but yeah. So an important thing in the opening is you shouldn't move out your queen. You've noticed that I've told you to move out your knights and your bishops and castle, so your rook is here, right? All those pieces moved out, but I've told you not to touch your queen, right? Now, the reason is the queen is super valuable, but the problem is it's also really easy to attack. If you moved out your queen, let's say over here, if you just started moving out your queen, then your opponent's just going to keep chasing your queen around and keep on attacking it, right? Now, here this bishop's attacking. And if your opponent's able to do that, then they're going to quickly gain like a lot of moves. Their pieces are going to be developed a lot faster, and your queen is just going to be super like vulnerable, alright? So never move out your queen too early. Alright, that's a good question. Okay, so now let's look at what we've seen so far. So number 1, we have move out a pawn into the center. Number 2, we have move out a knight to attack, right? Control the center. Number 3, we have develop the bishop. Number 4, we can either castle, right? Or we can move our other knight. And number 5, if we castle, then we have to move our knight. And if we moved out our knight before, then we have to castle. Number 5, we have to try and move one of the pawns so our bishop can get more space and allow it to move, right? And now number 6, actually move the bishop, develop the bishop. And number 7, now this is basically the last step before we get into the middle game, which is the second part of the game, is gonna be to move the rook that you castled with. So you castled with this rook, right? Because this is the rook that was, moved from here to here. Now using that rook, you have to move that rook into the center. Alright? Alright. So this is showing the opponent develops their bishop. You have to move it into the central files. So these are the central files, right? The D and the E files. So it's because I told you they're in the center of the board, so they are the center files. So these center files are really important because it gives you a lot of like control and gets you a pawn break quicker. So you have to move your rook into one of these central files. Alright? And that is the last step of the opening. Everything after this, it's going to be the middle game. So now we have 7 or 8 steps in the opening, and they're all pretty simple, and this allows you to get a good position, and you'll be able to fight to win material in the middle game and the end game. Alright, so let's just get a quick review of this before I give you your homework, and then we'll be done with class. So number 1, move a pawn into the center. Number 2, develop your knight. Number 3, develop your bishop. Number 4, castle or develop your other knight. And number 5, if you castled, develop your other knight. And if you developed your other knight, then castle. Number 6, move one of your pawns so then your bishop, your second bishop, can develop, right? You can move out. Number 7, develop that bishop. Number 8, move your rook into the center, files, so then you can get a pawn break quicker. Ian, do you have a question?
No.
Okay. So now with these 8 steps, you'll be able to get a really good position where you can fight to win material and get a strong pawn break. And remember, a pawn break is when you move your second pawn into the center. Now this might not happen for a long time. Like it can only happen in the middle game, right? And if you can get a pawn break, it's going to be really strong for you because you'll gain a lot of space in the center. Nicholas?
So at the steps you were going a little too fast.
Oh yeah, so I can I think it'll be fine because I'll be sending it in the email, and you can also just rewatch the video, and uh I've explained it slower in like the beginning, right? So yeah, you could just remember it from there, and I'll also send it in the email if you need. But yeah, if you want me to go over right now. So first, move one of your pawns into the center, right? You got e4 to control this square and this square. Then move one of your knights in the center. You get some more control, and your bishop can move out and stuff like that. Then you move your bishop into the middle. Then you're controlling some more squares. Then you castle. Now your king is super safe, and this rook, you kind of developed it, right? Then you move your other knight into the center with this. Now most of your pieces are developed, and you have a lot of good control in the center. Number 6, you move out one of your pawns, so then your bishop can be developed, because your second bishop wasn't developed yet, right? Right? Then number 7, develop that bishop, and with that, all your minor pieces, so your minor pieces are your knights and bishops, all of those are developed and ready to attack. Right, and number 8, move one of your rooks into the center, and with this, you'll be able to fight to get a pawn break. And a pawn break is just when you move your second pawn into center. So that would be, in our case, d4. We can't do that yet, but we can do that after a bit of time, which we'll learn about next class, where we'll learn about the middle game. So for your homework today, I want you guys to memorize these 8 steps and make sure you know these steps and exactly like the order, because this is important. You'll need to know this for our next class, because in the middle game we need to know these steps in order to get a better position and win some material. Alright? So I other than that, I will see you guys next week, next Monday on the 8th.
Bye.
And
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.